At my dad's 59th birthday party, he looked me straight in the face and said, "Tracy, the food's not for you. Just drink water." Right after he said that, I knew I no longer belonged in that family. Right then and there, I canceled the trip I had paid for just a few days earlier as a gift for him and my mom. Follow along with the story and tell me, was I wrong for canceling that gift right before him on what was supposed to be his happiest day? Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy. I'm 31 and run a small business in Houston, Texas, specializing in designing and constructing signage systems and brand identity. Everything I have today, I built from the ground up with my own two hands without any financial or emotional support from my family. The family drama I'm about to share happened around 3 years ago during my dad's 59th birthday. At that time, my company had just started running smoothly and was generating steady revenue after being in operation for 2 years. I rarely wanted to go home for holidays like birthdays, Christmas, or Thanksgiving. I hated how my family always looked down on me, constantly comparing me to Skylar, their golden child, but they'd find a reason to fuss if I didn't attend. That's when my mom would throw out lines like, "Your work's not going well, and you're still so heartless." Or something like, "Look at Skylar, always thinking of others." So, to avoid drama, I always tried to call during big holidays or important family occasions. I remember about a week before my dad's birthday, I called my mom, Aubrey, to ask about this year's party plans. Her tone was calm and casual when I brought up my dad's birthday. She said, "We're probably doing a small cake and a family dinner this year. Next year, when your dad turns 60, we'll do something bigger. No need to make a big deal out of it now." And right before we hung up, she said something that stuck with me. She told me, "Don't come home this year. No need to buy a gift either. Just focus on your work. Traveling that far is a hassle, and your dad's not expecting anything anyway." The moment I heard that, I was genuinely touched. I thought they were finally thinking about me. I thought maybe they realized I was at a critical stage in my business and didn't want me to be distracted or waste time on things that weren't necessary. After that call with my mom, I sat silently for a long time. I stared at the packed work calendar on the wall, but my mind drifted elsewhere. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the questions circling in my head. What should I get my dad for his birthday this year? Mom had told me not to come home. She'd made it clear there was no need for gifts, no need to call, focus on work. But I knew her. I grew up in a family where affection was never shown through compliments or hugs. It came in small things like a plate of fruit already peeled and set on the table, a reminder to bring a jacket before heading out, or sometimes a silence that carried heavy expectations. I didn't want my dad's birthday to pass by in silence. No message from me, no phone call. And more than that, I didn't want to get one of those late-night texts from my mom a few days later, calling me heartless. I'd gotten used to that feeling, not doing anything wrong, yet still being made to feel like I had failed simply because I didn't do enough. 2 days later, I couldn't stop thinking about the gift. It wasn't that I didn't want to give something, I just wanted to find something significant, a gift my dad wouldn't be able to brush off. And then I remembered a dinner from years ago when our family sat down to eat together regularly. That night, while passing around a bowl of mashed potatoes, my dad half joked to my mom that he wanted to go to Hawaii at least once, just once, to see what life was like in a place full of sunshine and ocean breeze. My mom didn't say no outright. She laughed, shook her head, and said, "We'd probably have to win the lottery to afford that." Her voice was gentle, but I could hear the truth in it. Maybe she did want to go, but never allowed herself to believe it could happen. Back then, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just small talk over dinner. But now, sitting in front of my phone late at night, I couldn't shake that memory. It felt like something once wished for, spoken aloud, then quietly forgotten. I opened my browser and typed Hawaii tour for 2 from Houston. Within seconds, a list of options appeared. Some were 4 days and 3 nights. Others were 6 days, 5 nights at beachfront resorts. The prices weren't cheap. A real vacation like that was going to cost nearly $5,000. But I didn't hesitate. My company was doing well. The cash flow was steady, and the team no longer needed my constant supervision. I could handle it. I picked the 6-day, 5-night trip to Maui. It was a 4-star hotel with an ocean view, full dining service, and airport transfers included. The departure date was exactly 1 week after my dad's birthday. I entered my parents' names into the passenger info section. I wanted this to be just for the 2 of them. Once the confirmation email arrived with the booking code, itinerary, and flight details, I downloaded the file, printed 2 copies, folded them neatly, and placed them in a simple white envelope. In my mind, I started picturing the moment they'd open it in the middle of the party. I imagined them going silent for a few seconds. Maybe my mom covering her mouth with her hand and my dad smiling that rare, quiet smile of his. Perhaps they'd hug me, say something simple like, "Thank you," or even, "We're proud of you." At that moment, I felt happy. Not the happy that makes you laugh out loud, but the kind that spreads slowly and deeply from your chest. Like when you give something that feels right and believe just this once, you may finally be seen, not as the useless one, but as a grown daughter who understands, who quietly does what's right. I didn't tell anyone about the gift in the days that followed. I wanted to hold on to it until that exact moment at the party, not to make a big surprise, but to prove to myself that I remembered what my parents once said, even if they had long forgotten me. A week later, on Sunday morning, I left my apartment in Houston to bring my dad his birthday gift. As the clock struck 9, I got in the car and started the nearly 2-hour drive to Fredericksburg, where my parents had lived for over 10 years. During the drive, I played some soft music. All I could think about was the look on my parents' faces if they opened the door and saw me standing there. I imagined my mom's smile and my dad's quiet nod. Just before 11, I arrived. But as I turned onto the familiar small street, I froze momentarily. There were a lot of cars parked out front. I recognized most of them, family cars. And right then, my mom's words from a week earlier echoed in my head that there wouldn't be anything this year, just a small cake and a quiet dinner at home. For a second, I felt a flicker of doubt, but I quickly brushed it off. Maybe they changed their minds at the last minute and forgot to tell me. Perhaps they didn't want to call me back because they feared it would affect my work. I tried to believe that. After circling, I found a parking spot pretty far down the street. I walked quickly toward the house. The gate wasn't locked, which made me feel more certain I was right. They were having a party, and I was just late. The closer I got to the door, the louder the chatter became. And then just before stepping into the house, I heard Uncle Jaden's voice, one of my dad's close relatives calling out from the living room, "Tracy's not coming this year?" Right after that came my dad's voice. He said, "She's not coming, and it's better that way. A failure like her only ruins the mood when she shows up." Hearing that from my father, I stood frozen at the front door, unable to believe what I had just heard. At that moment, another voice rang out from inside the living room. It was Brian, my cousin. He shouted like he'd just seen a ghost in broad daylight. "Tracy, she's here." Suddenly, all eyes turned. Some were shocked, some curious, and more than a few carried judgment. My dad turned too. He saw me, and for a brief second looked uneasy. Then, almost out of reflex, he said, "I was joking. Don't take it seriously." After saying that, he turned his back and walked away as if nothing had happened. Once I pulled myself together, I stepped inside. I quickly nodded to a few relatives I never cared to see. They didn't bother hiding the judgment in their eyes. As I walked past, I could hear a few whispers behind my back. They said, "She came empty-handed to her own dad's birthday. Still a failure after all these years. Nothing like Skylar." I heard it all, but I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't think it was worth it. At that moment, my mom and Skylar came up from the kitchen. The moment she saw me, my mom frowned. She didn't look surprised or happy. Her tone turned sharp. She said, "Why didn't you call ahead so we could prepare food? I only cooked for 20. Right then and there, I understood something clearly. This wasn't a last-minute gathering. This wasn't the simple little dinner she had told me about. This was a planned party, one I was never meant to be part of. Right after my mom spoke, Skylar jumped in. Her voice was full of blame, not even trying to hide it in front of the guests. "You showed up with nothing. It's Dad's birthday. The least you could do is bring a decent gift. You are useless." I was about to pull the 2 envelopes out of my coat pocket. I was ready to tell her that I hadn't come empty-handed, but for some reason, my better judgment held me back. I swallowed everything I wanted to say, then gave a crooked smile without a word. After that, I sat by the window in the nearest empty chair. About 5 minutes later, Skylar walked over to where I was sitting, pointed at the chair, and said in that familiar tone of hers, "That's my seat. If you want to sit, grab a chair from the storage." Before I could say anything, Brian, my cousin, spoke up from behind me. "I'll go with you." He said it right when I started feeling out of place, and I knew he didn't do it out of politeness. He didn't want me to feel completely alone on a day I should never have returned. I nodded right away, and we both went out to the storage. We brought back 2 folding chairs. I sat in one, and we left the other open in case someone else needed a seat. The party officially started right after that when the clock struck 11. After the usual candle blowing and birthday song, my dad stood up, clasped his hands behind his back, smiled, and said, "The party's officially on. Everyone help yourselves." People clapped, laughed, and started lining up for food. And right as the mood lifted, my dad's voice rang out loud enough to rise over the clinking of plates and silverware. "Tracy, the food's not for you. Just drink water." At that moment, I froze. Almost every sound in the house disappeared, leaving only that sentence in the air. I stood up and looked straight at him, trying to keep my voice steady, though it couldn't be soft anymore. I asked, almost shouting, "Are you serious right now?" Without missing a beat, he replied, "Dead serious." I clenched my fists slightly, feeling like my whole body was pushing back against every small humiliation piled up over the years. I asked again, slower this time, "Then tell me why." This time my mom answered. Her tone remained calm, but her words cut sharp and cold. "Tracy, you weren't invited. You came on your own, and I only prepared food for 20 people. Right then, Brian turned to my mom and said gently, but firmly, "It's okay, Aunt Aubrey. Tracy and I can share a plate." Before I could respond, my dad cut in, his voice low but sharp. Each word hit like a punch. "No, she came uninvited. Having her here makes me ashamed in front of everyone. She should be grateful I haven't kicked her out yet. She shows up empty-handed to her own father's birthday. That's all the proof you need. She's a failure." After that, I saw some relatives nod quietly. Others looked at me and then looked away, like they were witnessing something unfortunate. Then Skylar spoke up too, her tone crisp, like she was speaking for everyone in the room. "If I were you, I'd be embarrassed. I wouldn't have come. I think it's best you leave. Your presence here is making everyone uncomfortable." After all those cutting words, I stood still and listened to every single one. Each sentence felt like a stone being added to the weight on my chest. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't want to argue. All I could think was how I had made a mistake. It was a mistake believing someone might have remembered me, a mistake thinking I could be acknowledged. And then I knew I didn't need to try anymore. If in their eyes I was shameful, an embarrassment, something they wanted to crop out of the family picture, then I had no reason to keep writing their names in the next of kin section on any form ever again. After thinking it through, I decided to leave. But I needed them to know that I hadn't come empty-handed, and I needed them to understand they would regret what they had just said. I quietly pulled out the 2 envelopes I had prepared from my coat pocket. All the noise around me seemed to fade. I didn't say a word to those who had just insulted me. I didn't look into their eyes, waiting to see my reaction. Instead, I handed 1 envelope to Brian and said, "Open this for me." He took it, a bit confused, but did as I asked. While he carefully opened the envelope, I stepped away from my chair and walked toward my mom. I stopped a few steps from her, held out the second envelope with both hands, and said, "This one is for you." When she saw the envelope, she hesitated. Her hand was still holding the plate she had been eating from. She didn't reach out to take it, so I gently placed it on the table beside her, then turned around and returned to where I had been sitting. About a minute later, Brian finished reading. He looked up at me, eyes wide with disbelief. Then he read aloud, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Tour reservation. 6 days, 5 nights in Maui, Hawaii. Passengers, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Aubrey. Departure date, May 21st, 2022. Full service package, including 4-star hotel and round-trip airfare, paid in full." After Brian's words, the room fell completely silent. I looked straight at my father, the man who had just called me a failure and told me I wasn't allowed to touch the food at his birthday party. I spoke in the calmest voice I could gather after everything. I used to think the best birthday gift was something a parent once dreamed of, and I believed that maybe after all these years, I had done something worthy enough for my parents to see me differently. I paused for a moment, then added, "But now I understand. No matter how hard I try, some things will never be enough. And today, I didn't come empty-handed." I turned to my mom, looked her straight in the eye, and said clearly, "In front of you is your ticket. The total value of both tickets is $4,830, and I paid for everything." I didn't need to say anything more. The truth was enough. But the moment I finished, I saw some of the relatives' expressions begin to change. Some stared at me wide-eyed, clearly not expecting that number. Others pulled out their phones and started typing quickly, obviously searching for Maui tour prices to see if I was exaggerating. I didn't need to ask. Less than a minute later, I heard the murmurs behind me. Yeah, almost $5,000. She wasn't lying about the money. I didn't smile. I didn't look proud. I just looked at my parents. Their faces were frozen in shock. My father looked down for a second, avoiding my gaze, then muttered, "We were just joking. You didn't have to take it that far. Sit down and eat." My mom quietly added, "Thank you, Tracy." I nodded, but I didn't sit. I continued. "These 2 tickets will be canceled. I'll call the tour company and request a name change." I paused again and said, "And the person who deserves to go is right here." The whole room seemed to freeze. Even the clinking of forks and knives stopped. My dad stiffened. My mom's eyes widened. Skylar clutched her glass so tightly her fingers turned white. I gently placed a hand on Brian's shoulder. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. "Brian, I want to give you one of the tickets." Brian flinched slightly, visibly surprised. His eyes were unsure. It took him a few seconds before he leaned in and whispered, "Just for the 2 of us. Are you sure? I don't want to make things worse." I nodded, not looking away. My voice stayed calm. "I'm sure. I originally meant this gift for our parents, but now I think differently. This ticket isn't for someone who looks down on me. It's for someone who values me, and you did something no one else dared to do in this room." Brian was silent for a moment. Then he nodded and thanked me. After he accepted the gift, I said, "I'll call the tour agency to update the info. I'll send you the ticket details later." At that point, my father stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't blow up the way he usually did. He just hissed under his breath like he was trying to hold something in that he couldn't say out loud. "You can't do this." My mom kept her head down. Skylar stayed silent. Neither of them said a word. As for me, I didn't argue. I didn't feel the need to explain anything to people who always saw my flaws, but never once acknowledged my efforts. I stood tall, turned around, and walked out of that room, full of confused and uncomfortable stares. No goodbye, no handshake. Brian followed right behind me. He spoke just loud enough for the party guests to hear. I can't stay at a party where even the most basic respect doesn't exist. And that day, I truly felt grateful that someone still cared and stood by me. Around 3 in the afternoon, I returned to my apartment in Houston, and at that moment, something inside me quietly came to a close. I felt a strange emptiness when I stepped into that familiar space and set my keys on the table. Not the kind of emptiness that comes from being hurt, but the kind that settles in when you finally accept a truth you should have received a long time ago. They never really saw me as part of the family. Not just today, but for a long time. Since I started working, I had been trying to build a business from an old laptop and a few small freelance jobs. No one ever asked what I was doing. No one ever asked if I needed help. Even when my company officially launched, when I had an office of my own, steady clients, they had no idea. Not because I was keeping it from them, but because they never asked. The only person they cared about was their golden child, Skylar, the one they saw as innovative, prosperous, and the most stable of the 2 of us. Even though the truth is her job has always just been a regular office admin position, paying no more than $50,000 a year. But somehow they always managed to find a reason to praise her. Every time Skylar changed jobs, they called it a strategic shift. When she was unemployed for 3 months, they said she was taking time to recover her balance. When she broke up with her boyfriend for being financially irresponsible, my mom told the neighbors it was because her daughter had such high standards that it was hard to find someone who measured up. And me? They said I was distant when I kept my head down and worked. When I didn't complain about my struggles, they assumed I had nothing worth talking about. When I started my own company, they didn't even notice because they never called to ask about my work. I used to think they'd finally see me if I were good enough. But I was wrong. Some people don't want to see it, and even if you stand right before them with everything you've achieved, they'll pretend you're invisible. And from that day on, I stopped expecting them to see me. But life always has a way of going against what we expect. Just when I let go, they tried to pull me back. That afternoon, around 5 o'clock, my phone rang. My mom's name showed up on the screen. I had already made up my mind to cut ties. I couldn't see any reason to stay in contact with people who stood in the middle of a birthday party and called me a disgrace. But somehow in that moment, I still answered. My mom's voice was softer than usual. There was no blame in her tone, no sighs. She asked, "Did you make it home safely?" I stayed silent. Then she asked again, slower this time. "Did you eat anything? About earlier today, I know things got a little out of hand." I still didn't say anything. Part of me wanted to believe she called because she missed her daughter, but deeper down, I knew exactly what this call was. It wasn't about love. It was about fear of losing something she had taken for granted. And I was right. Just a few sentences later, she started suggesting things. She said, "Why don't we make that trip a family thing? The four of us, me, your dad, you, and Skylar. You could buy 2 more tickets, one for yourself, one for Skylar. We'll go to Hawaii together and start fresh. A family needs forgiveness, needs to stay close, don't you think?" After that, I laughed out loud. Then I asked her directly, "You called to get me to buy your golden child a ticket, right?" Right away, she denied it. "No, don't take it the wrong way. That's not what I meant." I squinted, leaned back into the sofa, and said it clearly. "I already gave the tickets to Brian, so there's no trip left. If you and Dad and Skylar want to go, buy your own." The line went silent for a few seconds. Then my mom spoke, her voice no longer soft. "Brian is not family. You took tickets meant for your parents and gave them to someone who's not even blood. Do you think that's right?" I didn't beat around the bush. My voice was steady, each word solid like stone. "From now on, Brian is the only family I have, because my real family is gone." I heard her voice catch, but I didn't stop. I needed to say it, not to hurt her, but to finally free myself. My family died the moment Dad stood in front of everyone, pointed at me, and said, "Tracy, the food's not for you. Just drink water." From that moment on, I didn't have a family anymore. And right after that, I hung up. No goodbye, no hesitation. 2 days after that phone call, I sent the tickets to Brian by express delivery to his home address. That same evening, Brian called me. His voice was still gentle like always, but I could hear the emotion in every word. He said he never imagined going on a trip like that. And even more, he never thought he'd be the one chosen. I told him just one thing. I don't choose based on blood. I choose based on how people treat me. Brian drove to my place a week later and boarded the plane together. As the plane lifted from Houston, I looked out the window and watched the city shrink beneath us. Inside me, everything felt like it was opening up. Not into some grand new chapter, but into something simpler. A life that felt lighter. A life without comparisons, without parties where I had to keep my head down. We arrived in Maui on a sunny afternoon. The ocean breeze was gentle, not overwhelming. Standing beside me, Brian slid his hands into his pockets, turned slightly, and asked, "Do you feel lighter?" I smiled softly and nodded. After that trip, I returned to my work. I got back into the flow at the same steady pace I was used to. I wasn't looking to make a breakthrough or prove anything to anyone anymore. I just kept doing what I believed was right, treating my people the way I once wished to be treated. Over the next 3 years, the company grew far beyond what I had initially hoped for. We moved into a new office, brighter, more spacious, and filled with greenery. Projects came in consistently. Former clients returned, and new ones kept finding us. Then, about a month ago, a startup-focused magazine reached out unexpectedly. They said they had heard about my journey from one of our past clients and wanted to do an interview. I agreed right away, not to boost my name, but because I knew someone like the old me needed to hear the story, about starting from nothing, about setbacks and the storms I had to push through. I talked about my family during that interview, but didn't mention anyone by name. The article was published just a few days later alongside a photo of me standing in front of our office. The headline read, "Founder of the 7-figure interior company, once seen as a failure by her family." I read the whole article, but I didn't share it on social media. I didn't send the link to anyone. Still, like everything else in this era, the story found its way to the people who once thought I would never amount to anything. And just like I expected 2 weeks ago, my family reached out to me again. I wasn't surprised. I figured they had read the post or someone had sent them the link. The headline didn't need to scream, but it was enough to make those who turned their backs stop and look again. I first saw a list of missed calls, more than 15, all from my mom and dad. No voicemail, no long text trying to explain. They just called over and over, then went silent. On the 3rd day, a message popped up on my screen. It was still my dad's old number. "We're proud of you. Let's have dinner like we used to." No apology, no acknowledgement, just an invitation to come back as if nothing had ever happened, as if I was supposed to feel grateful that they were finally willing to. Even though I've blocked every form of contact, I still feel they haven't stopped. Maybe not today, not next week, but I know that one day soon they'll come looking again. They might track down my office address, stand in the parking lot, wait by the front door like strangers, and then call it a family reunion. They might show up with some tragic story, talking about illness, hardship, or a loan about to come due, and tell me I'm their only hope. I'm not a cruel person, but I've learned to love myself enough not to trade my peace for the weight of blood ties, and I know for sure I won't help them, not even once. If I have to, I'll call a lawyer. I'll set clear legal boundaries. I won't let one of them take even one more step into the life I've rebuilt from the ruins. Because after everything, I've realized that some wounds can't be healed with an apology, and some relationships are no longer family if you constantly suffer to hold on to them. I used to think forgiveness was a virtue, but now I understand that knowing where to draw the line is how you save yourself from being hurt again. And this time, I'm choosing peace. Not the kind they give me, but the kind I've claimed for myself. And before I end the story, I want to ask you, the ones who have stayed and listened until the very last moments of this journey, was I wrong for canceling my parents' tickets on my dad's birthday? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I genuinely want to hear your answers. And if you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click like, and share this with anyone struggling with the meaning of the word family. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the following story. Goodbye, and I wish you a peaceful day.